My son's bride slapped me at her wedding. What I did next destroyed my family forever. My name is Elaine Turner. I'm 58 years old, and I live in Charlotte, North Carolina. For most of my life, I thought I understood love. I thought sacrifice meant putting someone else first, no matter the cost. I thought being a good mother meant swallowing pain, biting my tongue, and holding my head high even when the world tried to break me. I was wrong. Because on June 15th, in front of 200 guests dressed in their finest clothes, my son stood beside the woman who humiliated me and said nothing. He watched her shove me. He watched her knock the microphone from my hand. He watched me stumble backward, my gold dress catching the light as I tried not to fall. And when I looked at him, my baby, the boy I raised alone, the child I worked 2 jobs to feed, he didn't defend me. He told me to sit down. That moment broke something inside me, something I didn't even know could break. And when I walked out of that reception hall, my heels clicking against the marble floor, I said 7 words that would haunt me for the rest of my life. 7 words that planted a seed of suspicion. 7 words that would rip my family apart. I didn't plan to destroy anything. I just wanted my son to see the truth. But the truth is a dangerous thing when it's been buried too long. And what came next? The secrets, the lies, the recordings? None of us were ready for it. This is the story of how I lost my son twice. Once to a woman who hated me, and once to my own anger.
My son Jalen was 4 years old when his father walked out on us. I remember that day like it was yesterday. It was a Tuesday afternoon in March. I came home from my shift at the hospital to find Terrence packing his clothes into garbage bags. Not suitcases, garbage bags. "I need to find myself," he said, not even looking at me. "This life, it's not who I am." Who he was, apparently, was a man who'd fallen in love with a woman he met at a jazz bar downtown. A woman with no children, no responsibilities, no stretch marks or exhaustion or bills piling up on the kitchen counter. He left that night. Jalen stood in the doorway of his bedroom, clutching his teddy bear, watching his father walk out the door. "Daddy coming back?" he asked me, his little voice trembling. I don't know, baby," I whispered, pulling him close. Terrence never came back, and I became everything to Jalen. Mother, father, provider, protector. I worked 2 jobs. During the day, I was a receptionist at a dental office. At night, I cleaned office buildings downtown. On weekends, I went to night school to finish my degree in social work. I was exhausted every single day, but I never missed a school performance, never missed a basketball game, never missed a parent-teacher conference. Jalen was my world, my reason for waking up, my reason for pushing through the fatigue and the loneliness and the fear that I wasn't enough. And he was a good boy, smart, kind, thoughtful. Teachers loved him. Other parents always commented on how polite he was. We had our own little routines. Every Sunday, we'd make pancakes together and watch cartoons. Every night before bed, I'd read to him until he fell asleep. People used to tell me we were too close, that it wasn't healthy for a mother and son to be so dependent on each other. But they didn't understand. When it's just the 2 of you against the world, you hold on tight. When Jalen got accepted to Howard University, I cried for 3 days straight. Happy tears, proud tears, terrified tears. He was leaving. My baby was leaving. But we promised we'd stay close. We'd talk every night. He'd come home for holidays. Nothing would change. And for the first 2 years, nothing did. We talked on the phone every single night. He'd tell me about his classes, his friends, his dreams of becoming a civil rights attorney. I'd tell him about work, about the neighborhood, about how much I missed him. Then junior year happened. That's when he met Ariel. The first time he mentioned her name, I could hear it in his voice, that dreamy, distracted tone that young men get when they're falling in love. "Ma, I met someone," he said one night. "Her name's Ariel. She's amazing." "Tell me about her," I said, smiling even though he couldn't see me. "She's confident, beautiful. She knows exactly what she wants. She's studying business. Her family's from Atlanta." He talked about her for an hour straight, and I was happy for him, truly. Every mother wants her son to find love. But then he brought her home for Thanksgiving. I spent 3 days preparing for that visit. I cleaned every corner of my house, bought new towels for the guest bathroom, cooked all of Jalen's favorite foods. When they walked through the door, I understood immediately why my son was so taken with her. Ariel was stunning, tall and graceful, with smooth skin and long lashes that framed eyes that seemed to take in everything at once. She wore expensive clothes, carried herself like someone who'd never doubted her place in the world. But when I hugged her, she barely hugged back. "Nice to meet you, Mrs. Turner," she said, her voice polite but cold. "Please, call me Elaine. I'm so glad you're here." She gave me a tight smile and walked past me into the living room. Over that weekend, I tried everything to connect with her. I asked about her family, her studies, her interests. I showed her photo albums of Jalen as a baby. I invited her to help me cook. But every conversation felt like pulling teeth. She answered in short sentences, looked at her phone constantly, and whenever Jalen and I shared a memory or laughed about something from his childhood, she'd get this look on her face. Annoyance. Maybe even disgust. On their mass night, I overheard them talking in Jalen's old bedroom. "Your mom is really attached to you," Ariel said. "We're close. She raised me by herself. We're all each other has." "That's not healthy, Jalen. You're a grown man. You need to establish boundaries." My chest tightened. I walked away before I could hear more. After that visit, things started changing. Jalen's phone calls became shorter. He'd call every other day instead of every day. Then twice a week. Then once a week. When I'd ask if everything was okay, he'd say he was just busy, stressed with school, overwhelmed with work. But I knew. I could feel him slipping away. During his senior year, I met Ariel's Aunt Simone. Jalen brought both of them to Charlotte for Easter. Simone was a tall, sharp woman with an expensive haircut and jewelry that probably cost more than my car. She looked around my modest home with barely concealed judgment. "So, you raised Jalen all by yourself?" she asked, sipping the tea that I'd made. "Yes, ma'am. His father left when he was 4. She exchanged a look with Ariel. "That must have been difficult." The way she said difficult made it sound like a character flaw. Over dinner, she talked about Ariel's parents, both doctors, who died in a car accident when Ariel was 10, about how she'd stepped in to raise her niece, about the private schools, the European vacations, the country club memberships.
"Family money creates stability," she said, looking directly at me. "It provides opportunities, opens doors." I smiled politely and nodded, even though I felt about 2 inches tall. After they left, I cried in my kitchen. Because I knew what she was really saying, that I wasn't good enough, that my son had come from nothing, that Ariel was settling by being with him. And worse, I could see that Ariel believed it too. Over the next year, the distance between Jalen and me grew wider. He stopped coming home for holidays, always had an excuse,
always had other plans. When he did visit, Ariel was always with him, and she had this way of speaking for him, making decisions for him. "We're thinking Jalen should apply to law schools on the West Coast," she'd say. "We've decided Jalen needs to focus more on networking. We believe it's time for Jalen to be more independent." We. As if I didn't exist. And whenever I tried to express concern, gently, carefully, Jalen would get defensive. "Why can't you just be happy for me, Ma? Why do you always have to question my choices? You're jealous. You can't stand that I'm building a life without you." That last one hurt the most. Because maybe there was some truth to it. Maybe I was struggling to let go. Maybe I was holding on too tight. But I wasn't trying to control him. I just wanted to protect him. I wanted to tell him that the woman he loved didn't respect him, didn't respect us, didn't respect where he came from. But I stayed quiet. Because I thought if I just gave them space, if I just let things settle, he'd eventually see the truth for himself. I was wrong. By the time their wedding invitations went out, my relationship with my son had become a shadow of what it once was. And Ariel, she'd won. She'd successfully convinced my son that I was the problem, that I was overbearing, controlling, jealous. And the worst part was, I'd let her do it. I stayed silent, swallowed the hurt, smiled through the pain, because I thought that's what good mothers do. I thought sacrifice meant accepting whatever came my way. But silence doesn't protect love. It just lets poison spread. And by the time I finally spoke up, by the time I finally said enough, it was already too late.
The troubles started 3 months before the wedding. I was folding laundry in my living room when my phone rang. I expected Jalen. Instead, Ariel's voice came through the speaker, cold and clipped. "Elaine, we need to discuss your role in the ceremony." Not, "Hi, Mom Turner." Not, "How are you?" Just business. I set down the towel in my hands and sat on the edge of my couch. "Of course, sweetheart. What's on your mind?" "We've been rethinking the processional," she said. "It's going to be more traditional. So instead of walking Jalen down the aisle, you'll be seated with the other guests." The room went quiet. I could hear my own heartbeat in my ears. "Seated?" I repeated. "But Jalen and I talked about this when he was a little boy. He always said—" "Things change," she cut me off. "Your part will still be symbolic, just minimal." Symbolic. Minimal. As if I was a decoration, a prop they could move around to fit their vision. I wanted to scream. I wanted to tell her that I raised that boy alone while his father ran off to chase his dreams with another woman. I wanted to remind her that I was the one who sat up with Jalen through fevers and nightmares, who worked double shifts so he could have new shoes for school, who taught him how to tie a tie and treat people with respect. But I didn't say any of that. I just said, "Okay," because that's what I always did. I swallowed the hurt and kept quiet. 2 weeks later, the seating chart arrived in my email. I opened it on my laptop, excited to see where I'd be sitting. Maybe near Jalen's college friends, maybe close to the family I hadn't seen in years. I scrolled through the chart once, then twice. Table 9. I was at table 9, not table 2, where the groom's family traditionally sits, not even table 5 or 6, table 9. Near the back, near the speakers that would blast music all night, behind a table full of Ariel's sorority sisters I'd never even met. And my own family?
My sister Shonda, my cousins, my nieces, they were scattered across different tables, like afterthoughts. Meanwhile, Ariel's entire extended family sat together at the front, a united wall of silk dresses and expensive watches. That wasn't an accident. That was a message. I called Shonda that night, my voice shaking. "They put me at table 9, I whispered. There was a long pause on the other end. Then Shonda exploded. "Table 9! Elaine, are you kidding me? You're his mother. You're the reason he's even alive. And they're treating you like some random guest they felt obligated to invite?" "I know, but nothing. You need to call Jalen right now and tell him this is unacceptable." But I didn't call him. I didn't want to cause problems. I didn't want him to think I was jealous or dramatic or difficult. So I stayed silent. I stayed silent when Ariel forgot to put my name on the rehearsal dinner program. I stayed silent when she told me the dress I'd bought, a beautiful gold gown with beaded sleeves, was a bit much, and suggested I wear something more understated. I stayed silent when she handed me a script for my speech and said, "Keep it short and simple. We don't want you going on and on." Every time I bit my tongue, I told myself it was temporary. Once the wedding was over, things would settle. Ariel would relax. Jalen would remember who raised him. I was lying to myself, because silence doesn't protect peace. It just lets poison grow. And by the time I realized that, it was too late.
The morning of the wedding, I woke up with a knot in my stomach. I stood in front of my bedroom mirror, smoothing down my gold dress, trying to convince myself that today would be fine, that I'd smile through the ceremony, give my short speech, and celebrate my son's happiness. But when I arrived at the venue, a grand hall with white roses climbing the walls and gold ribbons draped from the ceiling, I felt it immediately. The tension. Ariel was standing near the entrance in her robe, surrounded by her bridesmaids. They were laughing about something, champagne glasses in hand. But the moment I walked in, the laughter stopped. She turned and looked at me. Her eyes traveled from my face down to my dress, then back up again. Her smile didn't reach her eyes. "Elaine," she said flatly, "you're here." "Of course I'm here," I said, trying to keep my voice light. "Wouldn't miss this for the world." One of her bridesmaids whispered something, and they all turned to look at me. I felt my face grow hot. I found Jalen in the groom's suite, adjusting his bow tie in the mirror. When he saw me, his face softened. "Hey, Ma," he said, pulling me into a hug. For a moment, everything felt normal, like it was just the two of us again. But then Ariel's voice called from the hallway. "Babe, we need you for photos." And just like that, he pulled away. The ceremony was beautiful. I won't lie about that. Ariel floated down the aisle like something out of a magazine, and Jalen's eyes filled with tears when he saw her. I cried too, but my tears weren't just happiness. After the vows, the photographer gathered everyone for pictures. Family shots, bridal shots, candid moments that would be framed and hung on walls for years. "All right, let's get one with the groom's mother," the photographer called out. I stepped forward, my heart lifting just a little. But before I could reach Jalen's side, Ariel moved in front of me. "Actually, let's save that for later," she said sharply. "We're running behind." The photographer looked confused. So did a few of the guests nearby. Jalen opened his mouth like he was going to say something, but then he just nodded, and I stepped back. Later, during the Unity Candle ceremony, the officiant invited the parents to join the couple at the altar.
It was supposed to be a symbolic moment, mothers lighting candles to represent the joining of two families. I stood up from my seat at table 9, smoothing my dress. But before I could take 2 steps, Ariel's voice rang out across the hall. Actually, let's keep it simple. My Aunt Simone will join us. There was a murmur through the crowd. A few people turned to look at me. I could feel their pity like a weight on my chest. Jalen glanced at me. Our eyes met. And he said nothing. He just turned back to Ariel and smiled. I sat down slowly, my hands trembling in my lap. My sister Shonda reached over from her table and squeezed my hand, but I couldn't look at her. If I did, I'd fall apart right there. I made it through the ceremony. I made it through the cocktail hour. I even managed to smile when people came up to congratulate me. But inside, I was breaking. And the worst part, I knew it was only going to get worse, because the reception was just beginning.
The reception hall was buzzing with energy. Music played softly in the background while guests mingled, plates of food balanced in their hands, laughter rising and falling like waves. I sat at table 9, watching my son dance with his new wife. They looked happy. He looked happy. And I should have been happy too. But all I could think about was how far away I was, how invisible I'd become. Then the DJ announced it was time for speeches. I'd rewritten mine 14 times, stayed up late crossing outwards, adding new ones, trying to make it perfect. I wanted Jalen to know how proud I was, how much I loved him, how grateful I was to have raised such a kind, intelligent, strong man. I stood up when my name was called, my note cards trembling in my hands. The walk to the microphone felt like miles. When I reached the front of the room, I looked out at the crowd, 200 faces staring back at me, some smiling, some curious, some already bored. I cleared my throat and began. Good evening, everyone. My name is Elaine Turner, and I'm Jalen's mother. A few people clapped politely. I remember the day Jalen was born like it was yesterday. He came into this world screaming, and he didn't stop for 3 hours. A few chuckles. But from that very first moment, I knew he was special. I knew he was going to grow up to be someone incredible. And watching him stand here today, excuse me. I stopped mid-sentence. Ariel was walking toward me, her face tight with anger. Her bridesmaids watched from their table, eyes wide. "What are you doing?" I whispered. "You're talking too long." "I've only been speaking for 30 seconds. I said what I said." She grabbed my shoulder. Not gently, not like someone asking me to step aside. She shoved me. I stumbled backward, my heel catching on the edge of the platform. My note cards scattered across the floor. There were gasps, chairs scraping. Someone said, "Oh my God." I tried to steady myself, reaching for the microphone stand. And that's when she slapped it out of my hand. The microphone hit the floor with a loud crack, feedback screeching through the speakers. The room went dead silent. My face burned. My chest felt tight. I couldn't breathe. In 58 years, no one had ever put their hands on me like that. I looked at Jalen. He was standing near the head table, his mouth slightly open, his eyes wide. But he didn't move. He didn't rush to my side. He didn't tell Ariel to stop. He didn't defend me. He just looked embarrassed. "Mom," he said quietly, his voice barely carrying across the room, "maybe you should just sit down." Sit down. After being shoved, after being humiliated, after being treated like I was nothing, he wanted me to sit down? I felt something inside me crack, not break, crack.
like glass that's been hit but hasn't shattered yet. I bent down slowly and picked up my purse. My hands were shaking so badly I almost dropped it. Then I straightened my back, lifted my chin, and walked toward the exit. But before I reached the door, I stopped. I turned around and looked at Ariel, at Jalen, at all 200 people watching me leave. And I said the words that would change everything. You chose her over me today, Jalen, but you don't know what she's hiding from you. The room froze. Ariel's face went pale, then red. You better not start any drama. I didn't answer. I just walked out into the cool night air, my heels clicking against the pavement. Behind me, I could hear voices rising, confusion, shock, anger. But I didn't look back, because I'd planted a seed. And seeds don't stay buried forever.
For 2 days, I didn't hear from Jalen. No calls, no texts, nothing. I kept my phone on the kitchen counter, checking it every few minutes like some lovesick teenager waiting for a boy to notice her. But the screen stayed dark. I replayed that night over and over in my mind. The shove, the slap, his face when he told me to sit down. And those words I'd thrown out into the silence, words I couldn't take back. I barely slept, barely ate. I just sat in my living room, staring at the walls, wondering if I'd destroyed the last bit of relationship I had left with my son. Then, on the third morning, at 6 a.m., someone started pounding on my door. I jumped out of bed, my heart racing. For a second, I thought something terrible had happened. A car accident, an emergency. I threw open the door, and there he was. Jalen. But not the confident, put-together man who'd stood at that altar 3 days ago. This was my baby. His eyes were swollen and red, his shirt was wrinkled. He looked like he hadn't slept in days. "Mom," he said, his voice breaking. "What did you mean? What is she hiding?" I stepped back, letting him inside. He collapsed onto my couch, his head in his hands. "Jalen, please," he begged, looking up at me with tears streaming down his face. "Just tell me. I need to know." I sat down beside him, my own hands shaking. I didn't want to do this. I truly didn't. I'd kept the secret for months, hoping I'd never have to use it. But he was begging me, and I couldn't lie to my son. 3 months ago, I started slowly. I got a phone call from a woman named Liana. Jalen's face went pale. "Liana?" "She said you two dated briefly, right before Ariel." He nodded, his jaw tight. "We did, for about 2 months. But then, I don't know, things just fell apart. She stopped returning my calls, stopped answering my texts. I figured she just wasn't interested." I took a deep breath. "That's not what happened, Jalen." "What do you mean?" "She contacted Liana after you two broke up. She threatened her." The room went silent. I could hear the clock ticking on the wall, the hum of the refrigerator in the kitchen. "Threatened her?" Jalen repeated, his voice barely above a whisper. "What are you talking about?" "Liana told me that Ariel called her and said if she ever spoke to you again, she'd destroy her reputation. She said she'd spread lies about her, make up things that never happened, ruin her life." Jalen stood up, pacing across the room. No, that doesn't make sense. Ariel wouldn't." "She did, baby. Liana was terrified. She disappeared from your life because she was scared of what Ariel would do." He stopped pacing and turned to face me, his expression twisted with pain and confusion. "Why didn't you tell me this before?" "I tried," I said, my voice cracking. "Every time I tried to bring up concerns about Ariel, you shut me down. You accused me of being jealous, of trying to control your life."
He sank back onto the couch, his head in his hands again. I wanted to tell you so badly, but you wouldn't listen, and I was scared that if I pushed too hard, I'd lose you completely. We sat there in silence for what felt like hours. Finally, Jalen looked up at me, tears streaming down his face. "I married a monster," he whispered. I reached for his hand, but he pulled away. Not angrily, just broken. "I need to talk to her," he said, standing up slowly. "I need to hear her say it." "Jalen, wait." But he was already out the door. I watched him drive away, my heart heavy with dread, because I knew the truth was going to hurt him. But I didn't know there was another truth waiting, one that was so much worse.
That evening, my phone rang. It was my neighbor, Mrs. Patterson, an elderly woman who lived 3 houses down from Jalen and Ariel's apartment. "Elaine," she said, her voice low and concerned. "I don't mean to pry, but is everything all right with Jalen?" My stomach dropped. "What do you mean?" "There's been screaming coming from his apartment for the past hour, loud enough that I could hear it from my porch. I just wanted to make sure nobody was hurt." I thanked her and hung up, my hands trembling. Part of me wanted to drive over there, to make sure my son was okay, but another part of me knew that this was his battle to fight. So I waited, and waited. At 10:30 that night, my doorbell rang. I opened it to find Jalen standing there with 2 suitcases and a duffel bag. His wedding ring was missing from his finger. "Can I stay here?" he asked quietly. "Of course, baby. Of course." He walked past me into the house, dropped his bags by the stairs, and sat down at the kitchen table. I made him tea, not because he asked for it, but because I needed to do something with my hands. When I set the mug in front of him, he finally spoke. "You were right about Liana," he said. "She admitted everything. At first, she tried to deny it, but when I pressed her, she broke down. She said Liana was obsessed with me and that she was just protecting our relationship." "Jalen, but that's not the worst part, Ma." I sat down across from him, my heart pounding. "During the fight, she said something. She was so angry she wasn't thinking straight, and it slipped out." "What did she say?" He looked up at me, his eyes filled with a pain I'd never seen before. "She told me that years ago, she convinced me you were the problem, that you hated me, that you didn't want me to succeed, that you were trying to manipulate me emotionally so I'd never leave you." My breath caught in my throat. "Jalen, I never said that. I would never—" "He knows, Ma. He knows." His voice broke. "But I believed her. For years, I believed her. And that's why I started pulling away from you. That's why I stopped calling as much. That's why I let her treat you the way she did." He buried his face in his hands, his shoulders shaking with sobs. "She convinced me that staying close to you was unhealthy, that I needed to create distance to become my own man, and I was so desperate to keep her happy, to keep her loving me, that I believed every word." I walked around the table and wrapped my arms around him, holding him the way I did when he was a little boy and the world felt too big. "It's not your fault," I whispered. "She manipulated you." But I let her. I chose to believe her instead of trusting my own mother. We stayed like that for a long time, both of us crying, both of us grieving the years we'd lost. That night, Jalen slept in his old bedroom, the same room where he used to do homework at his desk, the same room where I'd tuck him in and read him stories. And for a moment, I thought maybe we could rebuild. Maybe this was the beginning of healing. But I was wrong. Because what I did next, what I said in a moment of anger and exhaustion, would shatter everything we just started to repair.
2 days after Jalen moved back home, my phone rang. I saw Ariel's name on the screen and almost didn't answer, but something inside me, maybe anger, maybe curiosity, made me pick up. Hello? You ruined my marriage, she spat. No greeting, no preamble, just venom. I didn't ruin anything, Ariel. You did that yourself. You're a miserable old woman who can't stand to see her son happy. You've been trying to tear us apart from the beginning. I closed my eyes, trying to stay calm, trying to be the bigger person. Jalen is happy now, I said evenly, away from you. He'll come back, she hissed. He always does. And when he does, I'll make sure he never speaks to you again. Something inside me snapped. For months, no, years, I'd swallowed every insult, every slight, every humiliation. I'd bitten my tongue until it bled. I'd smiled through the pain and told myself it would get better. But I was done. You slapped me at your wedding, I said, my voice low and cold. In front of 200 people, you put your hands on me, and my son, the man I raised alone, the man I sacrificed everything for, he told me to sit down. Good, she said, you deserved it. And that's when I lost control. You were never good enough for him, I said, the words pouring out like poison. You never will be. You're manipulative and cruel and insecure. And if my son never speaks to you again, that's a blessing, not just for him, for everyone who's ever had the misfortune of knowing you. There was silence on the other end. Then she laughed, a cold, sharp sound that made my skin crawl. Thank you, she said softly. That's exactly what I needed. And she hung up. I stood there, my hands shaking, my heart pounding. I felt sick. Because even though everything I said was true, even though she deserved every word, I knew I'd just made a terrible mistake. 3 hours later, Jalen came home from running errands. He walked into the kitchen where I was washing dishes, his face hard and unreadable. Did you talk to Ariel today? He asked. My stomach dropped. Yes, she called me. And what did you say to her? I dried my hands on a towel, avoiding his eyes. She was angry. She said horrible things. I said some things back. She recorded the call, Mom. The room tilted. She played it for me. Every word, every insult, everything you said about her. Jalen, you have to understand. I do understand, he said quietly. I understand that she's manipulative and cruel. I understand that she lied to me for years. I understand all of that. He paused, his jaw tight. But Mom, you're supposed to be better than her. You raised me to be kind, to be patient, to think before I speak. And the one thing I needed you to do was show me what wisdom looks like. Tears streamed down my face. I'm sorry, I was angry, I was hurt. She pushed me too far. I know, he said, but that doesn't make it okay. He walked past me toward the stairs. Where are you going? I asked. To pack, he said, without turning around. Pack? Jalen, you just got here. I'm not going back to her, but I can't stay here either. My heart broke all over again. I need space, Mom, from both of you. I need to figure out my life away from all this mess. He packed his bags in silence, and when he walked out the door, he didn't say goodbye. He just left. And for 6 months, I didn't hear from him. No calls, no texts, no visits. Just silence. The same silence I'd used for years to protect myself had now become the weapon used against me.
6 months is a long time to sit with regret. I replayed that phone call with Ariel every single day. The things I said, the way my voice sounded, sharp and cruel and nothing like the woman I thought I was. I'd spent my whole life teaching Jalen to be better, to rise above, to respond with grace instead of anger. And in one moment, I'd abandoned every lesson I'd ever taught him. Jalen did eventually divorce Ariel. I heard about it through my sister, who heard it from a mutual friend. The papers were filed 4 months after he left my house. But he didn't come home. He moved into an apartment across town, got a new job, started rebuilding his life without me. Then one Sunday morning in late fall, I was sitting on my porch with a cup of coffee when I saw his car pull into my driveway. My heart jumped into my throat. He walked up the steps slowly, his hands in his pockets. He looked older somehow, tired, but also lighter. "Hey, Ma," he said softly. "Hey, baby." We sat down side by side on the porch swing, not looking at each other, just staring out at the quiet street. For a long time, neither of us spoke. Finally, he said, "I love you, Mom. I need you to know that." "I love you too," I whispered. But we both hurt each other. She manipulated me. She lied to me. She turned me against you, and I let her. He paused, his voice thick with emotion. "But you let your anger guide you. You said things you can't take back. And I need you to understand that even though she was wrong, that doesn't make what you did right." I nodded, tears streaming down my face. "I know. I'm so sorry, Jalen. I'm so sorry." "I know you are. And I forgive you. But forgiveness doesn't erase what happened. It doesn't bring back the time we lost." He was right. We sat there for hours that day, talking through everything. The pain, the mistakes, the lies, the anger. We're rebuilding now, slowly, carefully. But some wounds take years to heal. Some scars never fully fade. And the lesson I learned, the one I hope anyone listening takes to heart, is this: silence can protect you from conflict, but it can also protect lies and let pain grow in the dark. And anger can feel justified. It can feel deserved. But it destroys everything you've spent a lifetime building. I stayed silent for too long, and when I finally spoke, I let rage do the talking instead of wisdom. If I could go back to that wedding day, I would have spoken up sooner. I would have told Jalen how I felt before things got so bad. But I can't go back. None of us can. All we can do is learn, grow, and try to do better with the time we have left. So speak up when you need to. Stay silent when you must. But never let pain make your decisions for you. Because words, once spoken, can't be taken back. And sometimes the truth, spoken in anger, hurts just as much as the lie.